So, of course, I'd like to start by saying thank you, everyone, for joining. My name is Cody Armstrong, and today we're discussing what's new in Onshape. And if you haven't attended one of these webinars in the past, we focus on the past month and the updates that happened in the past month. So, in this webinar, we're going to focus on the month of May and the improvements that happened during the month of May. As I always say with these webinars, I really encourage you to ask any questions that you'd like. There's a question section in the GoToWebinar control panel. Feel free to type in any question that you'd like, and I'll do my best to stop and answer all the questions before we wrap things up here today. Now, this is going to be really a focus on the last two updates, because we had two updates in May, and some of the features that happened or took place in those updates. So, without further ado, let's jump into it. So what I'd like to do is start with a simple explanation of the Onshape update process. I think this is a little bit different if you're new to Onshape, and I always like to mention it in this webinar because it is a bit different than a SolidWorks or an Inventor or one of those typical types of CAD applications. One of the first things I always like to mention about Onshape is the update process happens roughly every 3 weeks. So just about every 3 weeks, give or take a few days, we push an update out. And that update includes new features. That's what we're talking about here today. These updates are totally automatic, and in terms of how you interact with them, they're transparent. You sign in, and new features are there. The documents are upgraded automatically. The interface updates automatically. You simply sign in, and new features are there. So on your end, there's not much that you have to do. And it also ensures that everyone using Onshape is using the latest version of Onshape. There's only one version of Onshape, and that's the latest. And that makes a big difference if you do a lot of collaboration. In a file-based system, you have to ensure that everyone's on the same version. They have the same version of files. That's not the case in Onshape. If you collaborate with someone in Onshape, you can be assured that they are on the correct version. So those are some things to consider if you're new to Onshape and you're new to how Onshape manages updates. Keep in mind this happens every 3 weeks, and you really shouldn't have to do anything. You sign in, and new features are there. So the agenda today is pretty straightforward. We actually had two updates in the month of May 4th and May 24th. And what I'd like to do is pick a few improvements from each update and walk you through why I think it's a big deal, why I think it's worth checking out, and then answer any questions that you have. So again, feel free to type in any questions that you have in the GoToWebinar control panel, and I'll answer them as we go through things here. All right, so some highlights that I like to mention, and this is just a summary of so far in 2018. So far in 2018, we've announced some pretty big things. And if you're coming back to Onshape after a while, or if you're new to Onshape, just realize that in the past 5 months, a little over 5 months now, we've released quite a few big things. First off, release management. That was in late March. Simultaneous bill of materials, same update, late March. Configurations, that was launched in January, early January. And same goes with standard content, right? Standard content, nuts, bolts, and so on. That was launched also in early January. Finally, with this latest update that we did at May 24th, we've added Onshape Enterprise. I'm going to briefly go over Onshape Enterprise, but we're not going to spend a ton of time on it just because we've recently done a rather long webinar going over the details of it, and I'm going to refer you to that one if you have any questions. So final thing I'll mention about 2018 so far is each update includes a number of drawing improvements. So far too many to list individually, but just realize with each 3-week update, you'll see many drawing improvements. I'm going to go over a few of them here today, but just realize every update so far has included some form of drawing improvement or another. All right, so let's dig in to the most recent updates. Now, as I said before, there are two updates in May that we're going to discuss. So roughly every 3 weeks means occasionally we have two in a month, and May was one of those months. May 4th, we had an update that included a lot of really key core CAD usability features. One of the biggest and one of the most highly requested was the assembly linear pattern in multiple directions. And this is a feature that existed in the Part Studio level for a long time now, but you weren't able to do this at the assembly level. And the reason that makes a big difference, of course, is when we start talking about instances and correct quantity counts in your bill of materials, you want to pattern parts at the assembly level if that's, in fact the case. So assembly linear patterns in multiple directions is something that many users have requested for quite some time now, and it was added with the May 4th update. In my opinion, that's probably one of the biggest improvements just based on the sheer number of requests. We also added a few other improvements that are specific to the Onshape professional version, in particular part number generator improvements. So if you're using our automated part number generation tools, there's some improvements in where you can select pull the next part number. Right, that's now built into the interface. And also custom properties, as we get into details later on, you can now change the property display name. That was an important caveat, a lot of important detail for a lot of users out there building, bill of materials, where, what if I want the bill of materials to show QTY rather than spell out quantity, right? Or part NO rather than part number. Or, there's lots of examples I can give you where you want to change what the property is displayed as in the bill of materials and the assembly. You can now do that. One final improvement that I would mention, and this is for many users out there, one of their favorites, is the keyboard shortcut for switching tabs. It's something that makes going between recently opened tabs very easy. And I find if you get the hang of it and you start to use it after a while, it becomes almost a default method of switching between recently opened tabs in a document. I'm going to go over that. I think it's a really neat kind of usability thing that makes getting around in a document a lot easier. And especially considering that most of the time you're getting around between the same handful of tabs. And even if your document's rather large, chances are you're working within a handful of tabs and you're going back and forth between that handful of tabs. And if that's the case, this will be especially useful for you. Again, it's all based around recently opened. All right, so those are the improvements. May 4th, 2018. Let's get into a few examples of them. So what I'd like to do is start with the assembly linear pattern in multiple directions. This is something that, again, a lot of users have requested. In the past, if you wanted to create a linear pattern, you could linear pattern parts at the assembly level, but you had to do each direction individually. So if you had to pattern a part in one direction and then in another direction, you had to do that as two separate features. Right, and so it led to a lot of features in the feature list when, in reality, it could be done in a single feature that had multiple directions. And so that's what we've done. In the linear pattern command, you're going to see second direction as an option. Essentially, that's what's new, is this option for second direction. So I can choose the part, of course, that I want to pattern. Right? Choose a direction that I want to pattern along. Let's just say the edge of the part here. It gives me my pattern instance. I can define my distance, my instance count, and I can change the direction. All right, in this case, we'll go opposite direction. And there is my first linear pattern. And that's just to create the second V block on this end of it. Now, what if I wanted to then pattern these two along this direction? In the past, you'd have to accept this linear pattern, create a new linear pattern, and then do that as a separate feature. But now in this, with this update, you have this option for second direction, right? So I can click second direction, click a second direction. Let's just define this edge, and then just, again, distance, let's say 12, instance, let's say 5, and now I'm patterning the original pattern in a different direction, right? So that's second direction. One last thing I would point out, kind of a unique aspect of this is you can even add a third direction, right? So if I check third direction, I can select an edge, for instance, in the z-axis, for example, and pattern all of those in that direction, right? So if I needed to add a pattern in multiple different directions, including a depth, you could do that. And so I can certainly see in some scenarios where, again, that would have been 3 different linear patterns. Now, with these options, it's all built into that one. So again, assembly, the linear pattern, and the ability to create second and third directions at the assembly level is entirely new. And that was something that many users requested. Just means that you have to create less features at the assembly level. It makes it a lot easier. All right, so that is the improvement to assembly linear pattern. The next one in the list is the part number generator improvements. So for Onshape professional users, they have the ability to define their part numbers in an automated fashion. That's one of the benefits of release management and all of the improvements that came in late March. But one thing that you could not do was assign part numbers using the automated part number generation outside of the release candidate. In the past, the release candidate was the only place where you could assign part numbers. But now, if I go into the workspace properties, right, just the general workspace properties that I'm used to, you'll see that same generate next part number option, right? So just keep that in mind. You'll have that same option to generate part number that you had only in the release candidate in the past. This is just to make it consistent so that anywhere you go, you can assign a part number that's using the automated part number generation tools, that we announced with release management. So just a quick caveat. Basically, the new functionality is this button on the right, which on the right of part number. It will pull in the next part number from the automatic generation of part numbers. So that is an improvement to mention. Again, under workspace properties, you're going to see this generate next part number. That will grab the next available part number from your list. The next one I think is really useful, again, for getting around inside of a document, and that is keyboard shortcut for switching tabs. Question: why is the flip direction associated with instance count versus distance value? Give me a moment. To be honest, I'm not sure. I'll have to ask. That's a good question. I would have assumed the same thing as you. Meaning of the red asterisk. I'm not sure I follow. Meaning of the red asterisk. Are we going back to workspace properties? Oh, if you're asking about the meaning of this asterisk, it is a required. The asterisk just means it's a required field. You must have something there. All right. So, as I mentioned before, this is, to some users going to be a big usability improvement for just getting around within the document, and that is a keyboard shortcut for switching tabs. So what is that keyboard shortcut? It is Control Spacebar, right? Now, the key to this is it's using the tabs you've been in recently, right? So in this document, since I've opened it, I've only been in two different tabs, the drawing and the top level assembly. So when I go to Control Spacebar, it brings up those two tabs. If I hold down Control and just hit Spacebar, I can flip between those two tabs. As soon as I let go of Control, it switches to that tab, right? So again, I think really useful if you need to get around between the same 3 or 4 tabs. You're constantly going back and forth between these X number of tabs. Control Spacebar brings up the recently opened tabs, and you can use the spacebar, just tapping the spacebar, to index between the tabs that you have recently opened, and then let go of Control, and it opens. So again, very much what I would call a power user level feature, not something that the brand new Onshape user is going to get much advantage of. But once you really start to get into a document and you find yourself going back and forth between tabs often, this is probably going to be one of the fastest ways switch between tabs, right? Especially again, the key to it being recently opened tabs. It uses what you've worked with recently. All right, so that is the next improvement on May 4th. Again, keyboard shortcut for switching tabs, just using the control spacebar, control spacebar to get between recently open. Question, can it be used to swap between recently opened drawing sheets? No. That is a good request, though. Yeah, definitely give that as an improvement request if you haven't already. But this does not. This is looking at the tabs that you've gone between. All right, so final thing that I'll mention with regards to the May 4th update, and that is the property display name. So the reason this is so important is primarily driven by the bill of materials and how you want the bill of materials to look. So let's go to a different document here. And one of the questions that gets asked often is, what if I wanted this text to be different? Or what if I wanted this to display differently? What if I wanted to show, description as DESC, and simplify it so that it fits nicely in my bill of materials? Or there's lots of those kinds of examples. And so essentially what we allowed you to do is, as a company, go in and change the display name, right? So if I go into my company, forgive me here, properties, right? And what you'll see if I go to a property is display name. So this is essentially what's new. You can change the display name, and I can change this to QTY and save those changes. But the most important thing is that's what it will display. So rather than spelling out quantity, it will give me QTY. So just keep that in mind. If you're looking for a way to clean up, so to speak, your recently or you clean up your bill of materials, make them simpler, maybe make them less wide. That's one of the more common requests that we get. How do I change those display names? Right. Quick question. Can the default justification be change property? Can the default justification be change property? I'm not sure I follow. Forgive me. Okay, so to follow up on this, notice quantity now shows the display name is QTY. And this carries over to the bill of materials that gets inserted into the drawing, of course. So just to answer that inevitable question. To follow up on the past question, QTY value is always centered in the field. No, there's no way today to adjust the justification where it's at with regards to the cell. All right, so that is property display name. Again, under your company settings, properties, this is where you go in and edit your default properties or create new properties. You'll have the option under a property for display name, and you can change how that property is displayed. Right. All right, so now let's move on to the next update on May 24th. So on May 24th, 2018, we announced a really big update for us. And one of the big reasons that we made an announcement is because of Onshape Enterprise. Onshape Enterprise is an entirely new version of Onshape, really intended for those maybe larger organizations that have more complex needs than someone designing on their own, or maybe even in a small group. And it allows you to do some really neat things in terms of team management, project management. It reports some very insightful analytics into use. So it's something that really appeals more maybe towards the large organizations or the medium to large size groups. But it really is a game changer in that environment. right? In the past, if you had a group of 50 using Onshape and you wanted to easily create a project and give it to everyone with the right permissions and everything involved, it could be a challenge, right? But one of the big things we've done is projects and role-based access to those projects. And that's something that larger groups certainly make use of. So that's one of the biggest improvements, of course, with this update. Now, it wasn't just about Enterprise. I'll go over some of the details of Enterprise in just a bit, but we won't spend too much time on it. One thing I would recommend is if you're interested in learning all of the details of Enterprise, I would definitely recommend checking out the webinar we did, I believe it was last week, announcing Onshape Enterprise. It was a great webinar that goes into a lot more detail about what's in it, how it works, those kinds of things. So Onshape Enterprise, definitely the big announcement with this most recent update, but not the only thing. One of the biggest improvements with this update, and I know for a lot of users out there, this will be their biggest improvement, is the addition of parting line draft. For a long time, we could apply draft, but we couldn't apply draft to certain parts because the parting line needed to be maintained and the shape wasn't planar. It didn't split about a planar face. And so there was always this special category of parts that we couldn't draft, the more complex parts with a 3D parting line. With the addition of parting line draft, it really opens up the kind of drafted parts that you can create in Onshape. And it's something that a lot of users have requested for a very long time. And we are really excited to have it. So, Onshape Enterprise is a really big announcement for us, but I know for a lot of users out there, parting line draft is probably going to be their biggest, their most exciting update, right? Because it's something that I've heard, that we need. So basically since day one. So, really, it's more geared towards those doing mold design, but there are a lot of different scenarios where the parting line draft might be useful. The next one I want to mention is a small usability improvement, but can have a big workflow difference in how you make parts at the assembly level. One thing that we've done is in the center of faces, the center of gaps, the center of kind of odd geometry, there's now a mate connection point automatically generated as you create your mates that wasn't there a few weeks ago. That center mate connection point can make a big difference if you're mating two parts that aren't necessarily square, round, or perfectly shaped in one form or another. They may be kind of a random void in a part, and you're looking for the center of that random void so that you can attach your part to the center. The center wasn't an option in the past for some of these shapes. For a lot of shapes, it was the center of faces, the center of holes, those kinds of things, the basics. But if you look at the more complex shapes, the center of those faces wasn't always an option. And it meant in those scenarios that mating the parts could be tricky. It involved more often than not constructing a mate connector solely for that purpose. So this is a small improvement in the sense that it's just generating an additional point that you can select. But for certain users in certain situations where you find yourself doing this often, it's a very big deal. And it can mean the difference between having to create a mate connection point or mate connector and not. So, again, it's just an automatically generated point at the center of those voids and slots and things like that wasn't there in the past. Right? Question. Does it apply to does it only apply to closed loop voids? Yes. Yes. I'm trying to think of a way to get it to. I believe the answer to your question is yes. It's not going to show you the center of open loops. All right. Yeah. I'm 90% certain of that. Okay, so that is a big mate connector improvement. I'll go over an example of why I think that's big in just a moment. It's really useful in certain situations where the alternative in the past would have been to manually create a mate connector. And the next one, align drawing views. If you've inserted a drawing view in the past and wish that you could rotate it, a certain amount, and then what you end up doing is you end up, rotating it until it looks right, and then kind of eyeballing it, or even going into the part studio and doing transforms and things like that to align the parts for the drawing views. Hopefully this improvement will help in some of those situations. Now you can align drawing views with an edge of your part. So if you insert a view and it's at an odd orientation, maybe because it was modeled that way in the part studio, and all you want to do is you want to rotate it until this edge of the model is horizontal, you can now do that. You right click in the view, you say align to horizontal or vertical, and you select an edge of your part. And then we'll rotate the view so that that is aligned horizontal. So that's a small usability improvement. In the past, this involved transforms at the part studio level. It involved, manually moving views around with angle adjustments until it looked right. There was never a very clean solution, to this. So again, right click, you'll see that option, align to horizontal or align to vertical. All right, the next one, multi-level bombs in Onshape drawings. So in the past, when you inserted a bomb, generated using the Onshape bill of materials function, you had two options. You had, the actual top level or flattened, right? Structured or flattened. And what you really didn't have was the multi-level option, right? The ability to see multiple levels, the subassembly structure, so to speak, in the drawing level. And so now, keep in mind, when you go to insert your bill of materials, you will have that option for structured multi-level. If you're demonstrating, my screen is not. Oh, forgive me. I'm not showing you these yet. Give me just one moment. I'm just recapping them. I know I'm probably taking longer than I should. So one last thing, centerline improvements. Now you can snap center lines to other center lines. In the past, you couldn't do that. So really critical, especially in like structural design where you have center lines going throughout your drawing views and you need to attach center lines to other center lines. In the past, you really couldn't. Now the midpoints of center lines, the endpoints of center lines are selectable things that can be referenced when you go to create your center line. Of course, we're talking about at the drawing level. All right, so enough of the slide deck. Forgive me for taking so long on that. Let's jump right into these new improvements. I'm going to start with parting line draft. And I could start with just a simple explanation as to why this is so important. And this is really only applicable if you're generating draft where a parting line in the part needs to be maintained in that draft. And the primary example I can give you is if the parting line of your part is not planar, right? If it's, a 3D shape, so to speak. Right? So in those situations, we really didn't have a draft function that would work for you that would maintain that parting line edge as it created the draft. And so if you went to draft a part like this is just a kind of scrub brush, but you can see the parting line is not planar in this part. If you went to draft this, what you would end up is some really odd things happening, the further you get away from that plane that you selected, because again, it was a planar draft. So let's get into why this is so important. What I'm going to do is roll back. Let's roll to here, and let's go over how this works. So before I've done the shell or any of the other kind of finished details to this part, what I need to do is draft it. The option that I'm referring to, parting line draft, is an option in the actual draft command. So in draft, you'll see a new option in the top right for parting line. You select parting line, define your pull direction. I'm just going to select a planar face and say this is my direction of pull. Right? Then I define my parting edges. Right? This is the edges that will define where my parting line is. Now, one tip that I would give you is we have an option for parting line propagation that will select in most situations all the edges that you need, but we also have a create selection option. So if you're familiar with our create selection function, it just makes it easy to select a lot of similar or related or even attached things. So I can say, tangent connected, select the top edge, for instance, and it will grab all the tangent connected edges. Right. So it's just an easy way to grab all the edges rather than go through and left click each individual one. So just a tip, you can use the create selection as a fast way of grabbing all the edges. Click add selection and it will add that for you. A few details of it. It's a relatively straightforward draft. Let's go into an example here. You can see the preview of the draft there. I can grab and drag and change the draft dynamically, right? I can flip the draft direction with the arrow here, or I can do that here, switch face and opposite direction. So keep that in mind. Other than that, it's a fairly straightforward command. You have the parting line definition, and you have your pull direction. Then it's just a matter of defining your draft angle and accepting green check. One last comment that I would make, this is a question that comes up often. What if I split this part down the middle and it was drafting in both directions? You do have the option for symmetric and two-sided. So I could go through and select a combination of edges, and it would draft in both directions, relative to that selection. Particularly useful if I were splitting this mold at the halfway point of the design and not on one end or the other, right? Where the draft going in both directions right at that intersection of core and cavity is a really big deal. That's where I might use symmetric if assuming the draft direction is the same in both directions. Or I could do two-sided and establish a different draft angle for each direction, right? So that's really it. I can hit the green check, and now I've established parting line draft. Right? Question. Planar surface entity still need to define planar surface / entity. Still need to define the pull direction. The neutral plane defines the pull direction, right? Because of the way that feature is built. So there's no pull direction explicitly. It's defined as the neutral plane where the draft is being applied from. Since it's planar, it's kind of assumed that it's perpendicular to that. All right, so that is parting line draft. Again, big thing to stress, you'd select the edges that define your parting line draft, define your pull direction, but that's really it. It behaves very similar to a normal draft. Of course, the main detail there is you're going to get that maintained parting line edge in these more complex, molded 3D parts. All right, so I know for a lot of users out there, especially if you're doing any kind of mold design, that is a big one. So we are really excited about that improvement. I know a lot of users have requested it. The next one on my list is mate connector improvements, and this is something that I think affects everyone. Things like parting line draft, really you may never use if you don't do any of that kind of more complex mold style drafted parts. It just depends on what you do. Mate connector improvements really apply, I think, to a large group of Onshape users. And I think, in certain situations, we really had to create mate connectors to correctly mate a part into place without, going back to, face style workflows or anything along those lines. So this is a big improvement for, I know, a lot of users out there. It is a relatively small usability improvement. It's just an additional mate connection point that's there, but that additional option can save you a tremendous amount of time. So let me explain an example where I think this is useful. A good example of this is I'm trying to mate this plug socket to the back of this sheet metal part, right? And what I would really want in this example is a point at the center of this void, right? And a point at the center of this face. And I just want to bring those 2 points together and say those are fastened together. The problem was in the past, when you selected something like fastened, and then you moved your mouse over this face, you would not get a point at the center of that face, right? And that's really what's new here. I don't know if I move it here, you'll see this point right here That wasn't generated in the past. And this works great if it was just a simple hole or something along those lines, but this isn't, right? This is a few different lines and arcs, and it's kind of a rectangular shape with chamfered edges. It's the typical example where it's not necessarily circular or square, right? And in those situations, now a point is being generated at the center of those voids. And the reason that's so big is if this point isn't there, then I have to resort to one of these other points and then finding another point. And it's not really the best representation of the way those two parts should attach to one another, right? So center of the point, center of the hole in the void, center of the face that it should be attached to makes it very easy, right? And I in the past, I know a lot of users that in that situation would actually create a make connector, just because that was the easiest way. It was the path of least resistance, so to speak. So I think that's a big usability improvement. The other example that I would give is the machine vise. If you bear with me for a moment here, if you find yourself in a situation where you're mating a part to a slot, this is a big improvement, because in the past, the center of the slot was never a potential mate connection point. And so it meant that you always had to attach the part to one end of the slot or another end of the slot, but never the middle of the slot. And that's what many users wanted. So now, if we go to fastened, for instance, what you'll see is the center of the slot is a potential mate connection point. And I can left click there, and now I've made it a bolt to the center of the slot. In the past, that would have required mating to a corner and then doing like an offset. It was never, if you wanted to mate to the center of the slot, it was never very easy. Let's say it was easy to attach to the ends, but not to the center. Right. So that's another example where this new improvement will help. It's just again a small thing that you'll notice. It's automatically on anytime you select any mate. You're going to see this mate connection point being automatically generated at the end, at those faces, at those voids. But I think for a lot of users in certain situations, this will replace the need to create a mate connector. And especially in those situations where you really want to reflect the correct design intent. I want to mate part center to part, center or void center. And even if it's not a hole or a square, this is what, this will allow you to do that. So that is, again, the mate connector improvements that came with this update, May 24th, 2018. Again, the key is just you get that additional mate connection point at the center of those voids or slots. All right, so the next one, align drawing views, is particularly big if you do a lot of, multi-part part studio modeling or in-context assembly design, where you may insert parts into drawing views that are not oriented the way you want them. And there's other solutions to this that I've seen, but what we've added is the ability to align a view, horizontal or vertical, with an edge of the model. And in some situations, this will help to take that part that is, off by X because it was modeled in this orientation and align it the way it should be in the drawing. So how does this work? Well, let's insert. Let's go to part. Nope, I don't want that. I want just this one. And so what I'm going to insert here is just one of these clamp arms. And what you'll notice about it is, just given the orientation that it was modeled, when I insert the front view, I get it at this kind of angle, right? The orientation it was designed. What I'd really like is for this edge of the part to be horizontal, in this view, and I need to define everything based off of the view in that orientation. So in the past, you could rotate the view, but rotating it until this was horizontal was difficult. It was not, essentially, you just changed the value until it looked right, and you moved on. If you really wanted to do this accurately in the past, you had to even go into the part studio and do a transform. It was not a pretty workaround, right? So what we've done to try and help in this situation is, in this type of orientation or any type of view, essentially any type of view without a parent, you'll have this option to align view vertical, align view horizontal. And so if I select align view horizontal, for instance, and then select an edge on that view, it aligns that edge horizontally, right? So again, keep in mind that is something that I know many users out there have requested, and we now have. You could do, again, line view vertical as well. One question that's asked is, with a line view, can I align with a center line? To be honest, I don't know. And so let's try it. Line view horizontal. No. No, it's only taking model edges at this time. But that's definitely good feedback. I could see a situation where that would be useful, absolutely. All right, so let's do this. Align view horizontal, select my edge, it rotates, good. Now let's go to view properties. It does. So question that came up, show the rotation angle in view properties. It does show you the rotation, the amount that it's rotated in the view properties. Right. All right, so that is the align view. Again, you'll get it when you right-click any drawing view without children or parents, right? Without any kind of dependencies, you'll have this option: align view vertical, align view horizontal, and you can just select a model edge. It will rotate that view until that's aligned vertically or horizontally. Really useful if you do a lot of top-down design, multi-part design, in-context design, where you may not necessarily model it aligned with the front plane or the right plane. It may be just, depending on how you've built it. So definitely an important one. I know a lot of users requested it. So hopefully that answers, that question of how you'd handle those situations. All right, so the next one in the list is multi-level bombs and Onshape drawings. And this is actually just a real simple one. In the insert bomb command, there's now an option for multi-level bombs. In the past, you could choose top level, structured, or you could choose flattened. Now you have structured multi-level, and that's essentially what gives you the ability to see this subassembly structure of the bill of materials in the drawing level. Let me give you an example. Oh, did I close it? I think I did. Let's go back to it here. Bear with me for a moment. So this is relatively simple to show. In the drawing, in the insert bomb command, there's an additional option. And I'm not sure why that is so small. There we go. All right, so I've inserted this assembly, and this assembly has sub-assemblies and so on within it. And what I want to point out is if I go to insert bomb, and I choose my assembly, of course, what's new is under bomb type, you have this option for structured multi-level. Structured multi-level just means that it shows the parts of the subassembly as a part of the subassembly. So you see that nested hierarchy. Now, it's not, it just shows right now a dot pattern. So if your subassembly is 7, your parts would then be 7.1, 7.2, 7.3, those types of things. So it's, again, very straightforward. You choose the multi-level option from the dropdown, and then you insert your bill of materials. You'll notice that subassembly parts in a subassembly show with the dot 8, dot 9, dot 10, relative to the subassembly they belong to. So that is the structured multi-level. Again, in the past, you either had top level structured, which just showed you subassemblies as single line items, or you had the flattened, which is just all the parts in the assembly. You had no way to show that here's subassemblies, here's parts within the subassemblies, and so on. Right? So that's what that additional option gives you. Again, structured multi-level. You'll see it as a bomb type option. Right? All right. Question: how did you get the in progress watermark Is this from the state property? Yes, it is from the state property. And it is an additional option in the release management options, in the release management settings. You can turn on and off an automated watermark that presents itself for everything but released drawings. So obsolete drawings or in progress drawings will get this watermark. So let's get into that. Let's get into the next thing in my list. I didn't have it there, but I want to mention it. And that is the watermark in drawings. So let's jump back to our example briefly here. And let's go into my company settings. Under release management, there's an additional option for show watermark for unreleased drawings, right? All it does is it turns on the watermark at the drawing level for anything that's not a released drawing. So obsolete drawings, in progress drawings, pending drawings, anything that's not released will show a watermark. Right now it's just that on-off switch, and it's only for administrators of companies in Onshape. So yes, you need to be a professional user. That was a question that came up. So keep that in mind. Watermark for unreleased drawings only. So for a released drawing, it shows nothing. And for everything else, it shows the state as part of the drawing. Question: will balloons tie to subassembly bomb entries in structured multi-level bombs? Yes. And I'll take that even to the next level. You can insert balloons that are linked to the part numbers of the subassemblies within them. It will even grab at that level, right? That was something that was a limitation in the past. But to reiterate, will balloons tie to sub-level bomb entries in structured multi-level bombs? Yes. And so you should be able to go in and it will show you the correct dot number if you're just linking to item number, or it will pull the actual properties of the part that you're referencing within the subassembly by default. So I hope that answers the question. All right, so moving on to the next topic, Centerline Improvements. This is another drawing detail that has been highly requested. So I'd like to spend a bit of time in it, if we can here, and jump into it. The key thing here is if you work a lot with centerlines in drawings, referencing one drawing to another has never been that, one center line to another has never been that easy, right? And what I mean by that is, let's say that I'm designing some frame, like a bike frame, for instance, and I want to see, the center lines of the bike frame, but the center lines need to touch each other at certain intersection points. In the past, you really couldn't attach one center line to another. Right? And so if you had this situation where you had these multiple center lines coming together, you really couldn't, do much besides kind of, just placing it as close as you could, right? So take an example like, a bike frame where I have these center lines that go through the structural part reflecting the middle of it, kind of representing whether center of that frame profile exists. Now, in the past, you really couldn't, I could create a center line and I could, start my center line. It would even snap to the center there, but I couldn't attach this center line to other center lines. And that's really the big improvement here. Now I can snap to the midpoint of a center line or to the end point of a center line. And that means that you have that ability to place it with intelligently, not just kind of as close as you can, eyeball it, so to speak, right? Now you can actually, select those points, those midpoints, as your reference for constructing your center line, right? Again, I think useful in a number of different situations. If you ever wanted to extend a center line to another center line and you want to be able to reference one to another, this is something that you might use. Extending center lines to meet other center lines. And this situation, I think structural design, where you work a lot with beams and you represent the center of these profiles with construction line or center lines, this is something that you might find useful. So again, the key improvement is that the centerline function now allows you to snap to other centerlines, either the midpoint or the endpoint, whatever it may be. All right. So that is just about it. I'd like to wrap things up with just a brief mention of what's included with Onshape Enterprise. That question comes up often. If you want to get more details on an Onshape Enterprise, definitely check out the webinar recording we did. It's posted on our site. If you do a search announcing Onshape Enterprise, there's an hour-long webinar that goes into the details of it. Definitely check that out if you're interested in more details. I get asked the question, what is it? In short explanation, it's really a premium version of Onshape intended for companies with a bit more sophisticated needs, maybe multiple sites, large groups, multiple teams working together, in large groups in many different locations. And with those needs, they have additional requirements for permissions, for example. If I work with a team of 100 engineers, they work in different teams and different groups. They need different access to different permissions. It was a process in Onshape in the past to create a document and share it with the right people at the right time. And one of the things that we've done is the ability to create a project and store a bunch of documents together as a project and share that project with role-based access control, right? Role-based access control allows an admin to put together a group of engineers into a role, and a group of administrators into a group of administrators, and then automatically apply permissions based on that group, right? And that's something we really never had a formal way to accomplish in the past. Again, these are really things that are going to be appreciated by administrators or large organizations because of the nature of them. But that's not to say that small companies might not benefit from this as well. There's lots of things that you can do here, but it's really geared towards those that have those kinds of needs. One other facet of it is analytics and reporting. So one of the benefits of being a cloud-based system is we have tremendous analytics, and it allows you to report on that information. So you can report on where hangups are in your process. How many hours are spent in a certain project. How many hours has a consultant spent in a certain project? Have they opened the document? Have they started working on it? All of that is a reportable bit of information, and it really allows you tremendous insight into your engineering team. And that's really where it was built. There are other things to consider. There are ways as an administrator to force users to only use, enterprise-owned templates, drawing templates. So there's lots of little things like that I could point out that are benefits of Onshape Enterprise. But essentially, it's the projects and role-based access controls and the analytics and reporting. Another big benefit of it is the activity stream of your company. I see like a real-time news feed of all the things going on in my company. So that is Onshape Enterprise. Again, important to stress, really no core CAD features, but really intended for those larger, more sophisticated scenarios of bigger bigger organizations that have slightly different needs. All right, question. If I use auto part number generation, can the part number value be edited after the fact with uniqueness guaranteed? Yes. You can guarantee uniqueness even if you don't use automatic part number generation. We check that automatically. Even if you type in all your part numbers, if you're using release management, you will not be able to use the same part number twice. And that doesn't matter whether it's typed in or auto-generated, or both, if you change it later. All right, so that is what I had planned for you. There are a few minutes left, so I want to wrap things up here with just a quick mention of the Onshape Learning Center. If you're new to Onshape and you're interested in learning more about all the different things we've discussed here today, all the various aspects of Onshape, I definitely recommend checking out the Onshape Learning Center. There's self-paced training. You can take instructor-led training. There's technical briefings on a lot of various topics in Onshape. So it's probably the single biggest learning resource that we have for Onshape. So I can't recommend it enough. Definitely check out the Onshape Learning Center, learn.onshape.com. All right, so there are a few minutes left in the webinar. I'm going to leave things open for any questions that you have. So please feel free to type in any question that you have. I'll stick around for a few more minutes and make sure to address all of them. But that's it, everyone. Thank you and have a good day.